And I mean, it is the case, and this applies to amateur astronomers too, that as you get older, you have more disposable income, and I'm 68, and I don't, that's the new 50, right? And so I
Yeah.
think of myself as really energetic, and I love to travel, and I'm taking Vivian with me on my next trip. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I don't even care where we're going.
We're going to Antarctica
Ooh.
in December. I'm going to be leading an eclipse cruise that is, among other things, we're going to the Falkland Islands, and we're going to tromp around on Antarctica and scare the penguins.
Oh,
And then if we're really, really lucky, we'll see the total eclipse on December 4th.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a fingers crossed kind of situation. If you look at the climatology, uh, Antarctica itself is great. It's going to be very clear there, but the prospects out on the ocean where we're going to be and where lots of other ships are going to be is worse than 50-50. And it turns out the South Orkney Islands, which are just barely in the path of totality, create little clearings, and they have, sort of orographic clouds, and how on the lee side often there are no clouds on the backsides of mountains. And that's what these little islands do. They create little clearings in the otherwise thick clouds that pervade that part of the ocean. And so, yeah, we've got our fingers crossed that will be the case. But in case
it's funny you mentioned that. I was just watching this like a documentary about working in Antarctica, some 6-part series, and there was some talk about like how the West Antarctic Peninsula is like radically different climates on either side.
I had a chance to go to Antarctica once. This is some years ago when I was still at Sky and Telescope full time. I'm mostly retired now, mostly, and I covered planetary science, so I covered meteorites, and the guy who headed the National Science Foundation team that goes there every Antarctic summer, it's basically this time, said, hey, you should come along on one of our meteorite hunting expeditions. And the notion of living on the Antarctic ice in a tent that wasn't heated for 6 weeks just did not appeal to me at all.
What's not appealing about that?
just was not for me. I'm from Central California, warm winds course through my veins, and that was just not going to work for me.
But look at all your fingers. What do you have? You can a couple of them. You could just lose to frostbite. There's so many.
3 or 4 extra. You're fine.
That's right. That's why you were given 10,
supplemental.
Right? Lose a couple. Yeah. Yeah.
Folks are popping in the chat saying hi from everywhere too.
For everyone who's coming in, and you're putting things in the chat, please make sure that you go down to the bottom and select panelists and attendees. It defaults to just panelists, and you want everyone to see what you're saying. So, and we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And so hello, everyone, and welcome to the January NASA Night Sky Network member webinar. We're hosting tonight's webinar from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific in San Francisco, California. We're very excited to present this webinar with our guest speaker, Kelly Beatty from Sky and Telescope Magazine and the International Dark Sky Association. Welcome to all of you on the YouTube live stream. We're very happy to have you join us. These webinars are monthly events for the members of the NASA Night Sky Network. For more information about the NASA Night Sky Network and the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, hopefully I can convince Vivian to drop a couple of links into the chat. Before we introduce Kelly, here's Dave Prosper with just a couple of announcements.
Hi there. I just have several bits of news for everyone tonight. First off, as some of you have already sometimes posted, pen orders are being shipped and are now being received around the country. All orders from November and December have been shipped in the past couple of weeks. You can see my extremely high-tech shipping area. the rest of the ones for January should be out by early next week, and they'll be going out this weekend as well. And if you haven't ordered yet, that's not a problem, because the order period is much greater this time around. You got till like the end of March to do so. And the free pins for clubs will be sent out by April, unless you order earlier. And if you use something in the order form, you just be like, I got the 3 free pins, you don't have to pay. It's fine. So I'll put the link to the pin order in the chat, just so you got that. That's basically just all the information and making sure, your club's qualified by posting 2 events from last year, if you could. And also, just thank you for joining our little webinar tonight. And for next month, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a watch party. And so we're going to watch the coverage of the landing of Mars Perseverance and Ingenuity on February 18th. And you'll be able to join us for that for as much or as little as you want. We're lining up some special guests and such right now. And so if you're going to watch NASA stream on that day and you want a bit of company, pop on over to our stream. We won't be having the stream like actively in the background for us, so you might need like another device to watch it. But it's sort of like if you're going to just look at us and not watch it, it's almost going to be like a Night Sky Network and guests react to NASA coverage sort of look. Maybe you like that. But yeah, we're just having like a watch party, basically. It'll be a lot of fun. And details will be posted in the February newsletter, which will be out early next week, and also on the Night Sky Network website in the next couple days. And you can watch with us for as long or as little as you want. And I'll just post the link to the registration in there in the chat. And Kathy Moore is mentioning that that the Girl Scouts are in Idaho are planning a virtual watch party as well. That's awesome. And I realized I just put the pin order link into just panelists. So remember, make sure you've got panelists and attendees selected. And last one, it's also time to nominate your favorite astronomer for an award from the Astronomical Society of the Pacific. The ASP Awards nomination process is open to all. For if you got someone that's involved in research, public outreach, or active in the amateur astronomy community or teaching communities, please send in your nominations. You can check out the ASP Awards website page for details on the nomination process and info about previous award winners. And we'll send this info out in our newsletter again in early February as well. And it'll be on the main page in a couple days too. And we know you have a favorite astronomer, maybe in your club, maybe your local university, maybe they presented to your club or they're your buddy. Nominate them for an award, make them feel loved. And yes, this year the ceremony will be a virtual one, but it will be as glamorous as we can make it. So boom, link in the chat. And that's my brief news bit. Back to you, Brian.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. Lots of good things there. And so we're looking forward to that watch party in February. For those of you who are on Zoom, you can find both the chat window and the Q&A window. The buttons to reach those down at the bottom edge of your Zoom window on your desktop. Please feel free to greet each other in the chat window, making sure to select 2 panelists and attendees, or else it'll just go to the panelists. Also, let us know if you're having any technical difficulties. You could put that in the chat, or you could send us an email at nightskyinfo@astrosociety.org. If you have a question for Kelly this evening, please type that into the Q&A window. If it goes in the chat, it's going to get lost. And so put those in the Q&A window so that we'll be able to find those. And I think that that's about it on the preliminaries. And so I want to again welcome everyone to the January webinar for the NASA Night Sky Network. This month, we welcome Kelly Beatty to our webinar. Kelly has been explaining the science and wonder of astronomy to the public since 1974. An award-winning writer and communicator, he specializes in planetary science and space exploration as senior editor at Sky and Telescope magazine. Kelly enjoys sharing his passion for astronomy with a wide spectrum of audiences, from children to professional astronomers, and you'll occasionally hear him guesting on NPR or the Weather Channel. He's served on for a decade on the board of directors for the International Dark Sky Association, and he's an officer for IDA's Massachusetts chapter. So please welcome Kelly Beatty.
Thank you very much, Brian. It's great to be here. I've been watching the chat and seeing all these many names that are familiar to me. So I need a couple of shout outs. One is the St. Louis Club, which is going to have Ray Arvidsson as a speaker. He is one of my favorite people. That is fabulous. This is in the context of the Perseverance landing. And the other is I better watch myself, and we have instant fact checking going on because one of the attendees tonight is none other than Tim Hunter, one of the co-founders of the IDA in 1988. And Tim writes a monthly column on light pollution for the Reflector for the Astronomical League. So Tim, great to have you here with us. And without further ado, I'm going to get going. Let's see, I need to share my screen, and we're going to go to my, take that, and we're going to start at the beginning. How we got this far down, I don't know, but we're just going to back up, and here we go. Okay, so I want to kind of set the tone here a little bit and have you read this quote, which is something about the preciousness of the night sky that could have been written, yesterday, but it was actually written almost a century ago by a naturalist named Henry Beston, who spent a year living on Cape Cod. It sort of encapsulates the feeling that I have, and what we have in the night sky is precious, and so much of it has been lost. And it's been lost to light pollution, which is becoming more common, certainly among amateur astronomers. We certainly all know this term, but in the general public as well. It's basically artificial illumination of the night, and it has various forms: glare, light trespass, any disturbance of the natural landscape. And it, so much of it is wasted light, wasted energy, light that's not necessary. And I need to say here that the goal is not to have no light at night, but to have the right light at night. And we'll get into how that can be accomplished. But first, a little bit of terminology. We take the light that comes out of a fixture and we kind of subdivide it into three general categories of where it's going. If it goes above horizontal, that is nowhere hitting the ground and up into space, that's known as uplight. And the area that hits the ground within a reasonable distance, that's the useful light. And then there's this slice just below horizontal, which creates glare. And that glare, that light eventually does hit the ground, but it can be annoying in the meantime if it should hit your eyes. Now, this is an interesting, I'll show you some pictures of Earth from space. And those pictures show light that's going up into the sky. And you would think that the light from a lamp that is going straight up, like a searchlight, hypothetical searchlight, would be the worst. And it's not. These three computer models show how much light scatter is created when up here. Can you, Brian or Dave or Vivian, can you see my cursor okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is light that is basically shining straight up. And I want you to notice two things. First of all, it doesn't spread side to side. And second of all, the amount of scatter that it creates is relatively confined and limited. But as that light gets closer and closer to going out straight to the side and horizontally, eventually down here, just within that slice, within 10 degrees of horizontal, just above that, is where the most damage is done. And so for any of you living in a suburb of a big city, I live 30 miles outside of downtown Boston. When I look straight up, I am literally experiencing light pollution created by bright lights 30 miles away in Boston that are streaming, glancing overhead and passing through my atmosphere, the atmosphere above me. So that's where the real damage is done from the standpoint of sky glow. Here are a few examples of the good and the bad of lighting. Fortunately, these are becoming less and less common. Up here, this is an old style street light, and the bulb is down here inside this kind of glass salad bowl. And that salad bowl is a lens that takes the light from that single bulb and distributes it across the street. But some of that light ends up, because the bulb is down here in the bottom, some of that light ends up going above horizontal. Then about 1990 or so, many communities started using these full cutoff lights where the bulb was actually up here in the housing, the bottom is flat, and all the light went down on the ground. And that was the sort of first wave of improvement on street lighting technology. While we're here, I want you to notice this little thing right here. And for those of you who are seeing me in the corner, this is one of them. This is the day-night sensor on top of every street light. And it lets in light, and in days gone by, it simply caused the street light to come on at dusk and go off at sunrise. And that meant that that light was on, every night, all night. And that's because a lot of this lighting technology, high pressure sodium, mercury vapor, whatever it might have been, was driven by ballast, and these lights did not like to be turned on and off very often. So once a day was plenty, and so the technology evolved to just have them be on all night, which is obviously a problem for us. Another really bad kind of light is the kind that gets slapped onto the side of a building with the intention of trying to light up a parking lot nearby. We call these wall packs. I consider them sort of public enemy number one in terms of bad lighting. They of necessity send out their light horizontally, but also way more than that. Here's a side view of a wall pack showing the broad spread of the light both horizontally and up, and it's just awful. Another thing that this is, I haven't seen too much of this out in California, but maybe people can comment or ask questions or drop me a message. Here in Massachusetts, if you're a business and you don't want to have the expense of installing parking lot lights yourself, if there's a utility pole outside your business, the utility will very gladly put up a light for you that shines on your parking lot. And they're not very well controlled, as you can see. And this is kind of what they look like at night. The fog here adds to the dramatic effect, but they're just awful in and of themselves. And so I'm going to tick off 5 reasons why we should be concerned about light pollution. The one that we as astronomers worry about the most is the sky glow that it creates. I suspect if this is the demographic of a typical astronomy club, most of you are well old enough to have remembered the great blackout in August of 2003, which blacked out a great part of the Northeast. This is southern Canada, southeastern Canada. Toronto's dark, Ottawa's dark, Detroit's dark. Look at all these places that have no lights. The cutoff line was somewhere around here. And when that happened, it was in August. This was taken by a guy named Todd Carlson, who was in downtown Toronto. And he, while the lights were off, he took a picture. This is August, so the Milky Way is up beautifully. And he took a picture toward the south. These are candles in his home. And it's this just beautiful starlit night. This is from basically downtown Toronto. And then the next night, the lights came back on, and this is the same view over here on the right, and showing you very dramatically what we've lost, what we do lose to light pollution in terms of the beauty of the sky. Now, for many years, the National Park Service has had a program, a team that goes around to national parks and measures the darkness at night. They're called the Night Sky Team. And they've made it to many of the national parks across the United States. And what they do is they take all sky photos, very carefully calibrated. This is, the bottom is the sort of fisheye view. And then the top here is along the horizon. And you can see a couple of small light domes from very distant towns. But basically, this big purple band here and the one going across here, that's the Milky Way. And so this is a particularly dark place at Natural Bridges, Dark Sky Place. Now this, for comparison, is from Mojave National Park now, I believe it is. And that big blob that you see in the distance is Las Vegas, about 50 miles away. Very bad. Despite the fact, so here's my point. Las Vegas is 50 miles away, and you can see how even directly overhead, the stars are pretty washed out from light pollution simply because of the scattered light coming from Las Vegas. This is an actual photo in that direction. And this beam that you see here is not some artifact. It's actually the Luxor Hotel in downtown Las Vegas with this tremendously bright light up in its dome, beaming straight up into the sky. Really horrible. Now here on the East Coast, one of the most popular national parks is Acadia on Mount Desert Island. And it's for any of you who've been back here, it's becoming quite an astronomical destination because the town of Bar Harbor, which is this little light dome right here, has a lighting ordinance, and they're going to a lot of trouble to control the lights because a lot of people come to Bar Harbor and come to Acadia just for stargazing. And there's a huge annual event called the Acadia Night Sky Festival held in September, October. If you have a chance to attend, it's really terrific. Now back over on the West Coast, some of these national parks, recognizing that their night sky is a resource, an environment to be protected just like the daytime is, have gone to some lengths to really correct their lighting. There's a big project going on in the Grand Canyon right now, but this is Yosemite National Park, and you can see that these are all pretty effective lighting examples down here. These are amber LEDs, which are the most benign from the standpoint of wildlife. And the IDA has one of its signature programs is the Dark Sky Places program, which certifies that places are dark and will stay dark. And the towns and regions that apply for this have to go through a fairly rigorous process in order to get this certification. There are plenty of them in the Rocky Mountains there, as you can see. The one we're particularly proud of here, I'm from the Boston area, so up here in northern Maine is a new night sky sanctuary. That's the darkest of the dark. It's 90,000 acres of land that was donated to the government to create a national monument, and in those 90,000 acres, there's like 6 lights, so it is truly dark. Now, what I want to do is just for a moment here, I want to show you. This is a new thing that I just found out about shortly ago. It's a guy by the name of Sujay Patil, who's in France, and he has created a database of dark places to go stargazing. And this is a sort of summary map, and we discovered that this doesn't work so well if I just need to jump back in and share my web screen. I need to launch a web screen. There we go. Bear with me just a sec here. Okay, we'll go to PowerPoint screen. PowerPoint. Well, where are you? Portion of screen, Google Drive, box. Well, maybe we'll just skip that. I'll go back to this. So the website is darkskymap.com. And what I want to encourage all of you to do, Sujay isn't quite ready for this yet, but all the dots that you see on that map are essentially observatories of one sort or another. But it obviously could benefit from having the input of amateur astronomers in various regions, Southern California or Colorado or New England, where we kind of know the territory and we know where places are that are good stargazing locations. And so he's going to create a kind of interface with his website so that you can submit to him, probably in like an Excel form, a list of dark sky viewing places, and greatly expand this database. It's just getting started. There's also an app that is a companion app. It's called Meet Stargazers, and it's a comparable kind of map for finding places to go stargazing. So I encourage you to go looking for that, darkskymap.com. All right, the second thing is visual impairment. This has nothing to do with astronomy. It has everything to do with being able to see at night when the light is not strong. And just a little bit of physiology here, if you didn't know this, your eyes have 2 kinds of sensors: the cones, which provide your daytime vision and also your color vision, and then the rods, which provide your vision at night. And I want you to notice that the rods are much more sensitive in general. This is a log scale over here on the left. They're much more sensitive in general, and they're more sensitive to blue light. The peak is over here in the blue-green section. And that plays into important considerations later on. So here is a typical backyard in, say, oh, I don't want to pick on any place in particular. Let's call it Tucson. And somebody has a security light all night on all night. And if you're passing by, your eyes react to the light coming from that light, and the pupils that would ordinarily be dilating just shut down and make it very difficult to see what's really there, which in this case is a bad guy standing in the gate there, just minding his own business in this particular case, but you couldn't see him very well at all. You wouldn't have noticed necessarily that he was there. And so that's why even your security lights around your house need to be shielded in order to get the most effect out of them. What I tell people is, in your home, in your living room or bedroom, whatever, the lamps that you have there have lamp shades on them for a reason, because if you were just looking at the bare bulb, it would be pretty harsh. And that has to do with the whole safety and security of being outside at night. Again, it's not that we don't want any light, but that light needs to be down on the ground in the what we call the target area, illuminating the sidewalks and the streets, and not shining directly into your eyes. So the environmental consequences are significant from light pollution and light in the night sky. There are a lot of creatures that do their thing at night. They migrate, they prey, they eat, they mate, and our lights at night are disrupting that. And there are lots and lots of examples, but here's just one that I want to point out to you. These are pathways of migrating birds throughout the year. And here along the East Coast, we have one called the Atlantic Flyway, which, as you can see, goes right up the coast and right over the Cape Cod in Massachusetts. Birds have these very sophisticated means of figuring out where they're going on their migrations. And one of the things they key on is lights. And in a dark, pristine environment, they key on stars or the moon or glints off the water, whatever it might be. But if you introduce a bright source like a city in the middle of our migration route, then instead of flying in a straight line to wherever they're headed, they start circling that light. And eventually they could literally circle a building, a lit building or a tower or something at night, all night. They essentially become captured, fixated by it. And then they drop out of the sky of exhaustion or just dead, where they become easy prey. And tens of millions of birds die every year during their migrations because they get entrapped by the lights of the city. Not so good. The fourth bullet point here are human consequences. And this is an emerging area of science, and I don't want to try to hit this too hard, but it basically boils down to this. During the day, you're supposed to be awake, and during the night, you're supposed to be asleep. And when it's dark, there is a little gland in your brain called the pineal gland, which gets a signal from your eye, having nothing, that sensor in your eye has nothing to do with vision. It literally tells the pineal gland it's dark, make melatonin. Now, melatonin is a compound that's been shown to be very effective in as part of your immune system and your overall well-being. And at night, your body normally makes lots and lots of melatonin, and it enters your bloodstream. But if you interrupt that cycle by turning on a light, say you make a raid of the fridge, or hit the bathroom in the middle of the night and flip on the switch, you interrupt that cycle. And your melatonin production comes crashing down, and it's not good for you. And in fact, the late Richard Stevens, who died just a year or so ago, decades ago, realized that exposure to light at night suppressed melatonin and may lead to an increased risk for breast cancer in women and prostate cancer in men. And so we're not talking about just the light from a street light entering your bedroom window. We're talking about graveyard workers and nurses working overnight. They're the ones who really have their circadian system really messed up. But it's true for all of us that light at night disrupts our circadian system, and it's been a more than a decade now that this disruption due to light has been considered carcinogenic to humans, and this is fortunately these lights aren't here anymore, but can you imagine having to try to go to sleep with these glare bombs outside your bedroom window? Not good. And more recently, the American Medical Association has gotten into this activity on light pollution, and has found that light pollution and sky glow is potentially harmful. And more recently, they concluded that it's actually hazard to seniors. As we get older, our eyes, the inside of our eyes, get more cloudy, and our lenses get cloudy, and so the glare from bright lights at night creates a lot of scatter in the eye, makes it very difficult to see well. The last thing I want to touch on is energy waste. You have all seen, I am sure, images of the Earth taken at night from space. And here's one of the eastern seaboard, just to set the stage. Here's New York City. Here's Boston up here where I am. This is, let's see, this will be Philadelphia, and this is Baltimore, Washington. I think this is Richmond down here. Over here, this is Toronto, I believe. Chicago's not quite in the picture. So here's a picture of the Boston area, and you would think that the interstate highways would be the worst, some of the worst places for showing, for having lights along them. But actually, if you think about it, interstates are not really lit continuously. It's the state highways, and here are a couple of examples, Route 9 and Route 1 in the Boston area, that are lined with, businesses, all-night gas stations and McDonald's and parking lots that stay lit all night even though the stores themselves are closed. And it represents a tremendous waste of energy. These data right here are a little bit dated, but when this map was taken, when this image was taken, the amount of waste just from the greater Boston area was 15 million kilowatt hours a year, which was millions of dollars. And I'll show you in a second how that situation has improved, but it's not improved everywhere. This is a picture of downtown Chicago, an aerial view taken for National Geographic. And if there's any city in the US that's overlit, it's Chicago, and Chicago was overlit by design. For decades, the mayors and the city councils intentionally overlit every bit of the city, ostensibly to make it safer. Okay, so I'm going to take just a break here. I'm going to jump into the Q&A section. Darian says, I use a green laser. Do you know if it's possible to obtain permission to have a light switch placed at the base of a public street light? As far as I know, Dave, Darian, the answer is no. Street lights are almost always unmetered. And so even if it were possible to install a street light, which it generally is not, I am sure your town would say, rightly or wrongly, that having that street light turned off increases danger to the public community. There are solutions, and I'll get to them down the road here. So let's see, we have, what can be done to change the lights here in Chicago? Which is exactly right. Let's see, Joe, Joseph, that light is, I think Chicago has now finished a retrofit to LEDs. And what I don't know off the top of my head is whether those LEDs are connected or computer controlled or not. But Chicago is a very tough situation. We tried to engage them, and the IDA did, and they just did not want to listen to it at all. Alan asks, Alan lives in Wyoming, and he wants to know how to get a dark sky expert, how you can become a dark sky expert. I'm sorry, Alan. Yes, I think that the solution, Alan, is to become an advocate of the IDA, of the International Dark Sky Association. And there's a series of webinars that advocates, that is to say, you are, maybe your club, in this case, the Central Wyoming Astro Society, wants to become more engaged, or you yourself can become an advocate. And as an advocate, you have access to a whole bunch of webinars and how-tos that we have that can bring you up to speed. The other way is just to listen really, really carefully and take lots of notes during my presentation tonight. But you know, I am not a lighting expert, and I now know an awful lot about lighting systems and what works and doesn't, and it's all self-taught. Let's see. Deborah asks whether it's possible to add new improved non-glare design for best visibility regarding dark sky lighting. Yeah, it's a long question, Deborah. Basically, she's saying that police departments want much faster without mentioning dark skies. All right, so the problem is dark skies, right? That's a turnoff for a lot of people. They think that you want to make it dark. I've started talking in terms of, instead of dark skies, night sky conservation. You know, it's not just about being an astronomer. It's the biology, it's the human stuff, the kinds of stuff I'm talking about here. If your police chief can get, and the people that you're trying to approach can get past the notion of dark skies being all the lights shut off, and realize that there are better ways to do it. Brian, I see you jumped in here. Does this mean you want to say something?
No, I'm good.
Okay, it says Brian would like to answer this question live. Sorry. Let's see. Do I know what the legend is for the dark sky map? No, I do not. I don't know what each of those little symbols means. If you go, I couldn't get to the website to sort that out. I just encourage you to go to their darkskymap.org.com, and I'm sure it's explained there. Spencer says that a coffee cans can hoist up to the top. Each has a red LED with a battery. That's great. That's a very nice non-destructive way. Yes, the term, so back to Deborah, the term non-glare is what we need. It's not about just glare, Deborah, as we'll get into it. It's a bunch of factors, including the intensity of the lights, the color temperature of the lights, and I'll get to those in turn. All right, I'm gonna keep going now. If I get my, so let's see if I can get this to work again, because this is really important. Our sophistication in being able to map out where light pollution exists has gotten much, much better with a new series of satellites with improved nighttime sensors that have better spatial resolution. And not to pick on any city in particular, but here's Las Vegas, not a place that I would like to try to do stargazing from. And there is a website called Light Pollution, my own light, let's see, it's called, there we go, lightpollutionmap.info. And I'm going to try this one more time to see if I can get this website up. Let me call it up first. Lightpollutioninfo.map. Okay, now I'm going to try to go back to sharing my screen, and let's see if I can share this. Are you seeing a map of Europe?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic.
Looks good.
I got it to work. So let's go over here and let's pick. This is really, I'm going to show you how you can use this. Lightpollutionmap.info is the website. And so this is what these giant colorful puddles. We'll take St. Louis because they're very active. They have a very active club, and I know some of you are here tonight. Now this is, you can see up here at the upper right, this is the World Atlas of 2015. Back in 2015, the data that we had to work with was from a series of meteorological satellites from the Defense Department that had relatively poor spatial resolution on the ground. So you see that it's kind of resolved, but mostly St. Louis is a blob. If you go here to this drop-down menu, I hope you can all see that. You can pick, I can show you this new generation of satellites. Here is what it looked like in 2012, and you can see the resolution is a lot better. This is the light pollution map in St. Louis in 2012. Now here's what it looked like in 2020 for comparison. And you can change and jump to different years, and you can use these sliders to increase the amount of the background that you see. Or here's an example. And these make for fantastic presentations, and you can go anywhere in the world and call up these maps. But what I want to do instead is show you. I should have just stayed there. Let me do that. Now I'm going to go to a different website. Okay, share screen, right. Okay, now you should also see a map of the world, right? It's auroras. And I want to show you a really kind of horrible situation in the Dakotas. Oh, that's Winnipeg, Canada. That's not what I want. Where is it? Ah, here it is. Okay. These are the fracking fields of North Dakota. And this is a place where 2 decades ago there was no light pollution whatsoever to speak of, and now it's this giant wasteland of 24/7 extraction from the ground. Now, again, the website here is not the same as the one before. It's lighttrends.lightpollutionmap.info. Write that down, because what I'm about to show you is magic. Over here at the upper left is a little geometric icon. Click on that, and I can draw a box around this. You see me drawing that box? And having done that, it's too big. All right, I'll make a smaller box. The area is too big. It's the size of a part of a state. Then down here, having drawn that box around that area, down here at lower left, I'm going to generate a chart. And here's the chart. And it shows in graphic and gory detail over time how much the light pollution has increased in that location over time. And you can the numbers here, the fact that I've got 6 significant digits, 7 significant digits here, that's an awful lot of light per square kilometer in that area. Now you might think that light pollution has increased throughout the country over time, but that's not necessarily true. I happen to discover this today. I'm going to zoom in on Boston, my hometown, all right? And I'm going to do the same thing around basically downtown Boston. All right, and now I'm going to create a map, a chart. And what I want you to notice that in Boston proper, light pollution has actually trended down. Yeah, I hope you can all see that chart okay.
Yeah.
This is fabulous for your location to demonstrate what your situation is. And because the data has good spatial resolution, you can pick the entire city, a little suburb, a big business development outside of town, whatever it might be, and you can show very graphically how much the light pollution has increased. And down here in the bottom, it tells you what the trend line is, right, and how much it's increasing. What I want you to notice, especially about Boston, this is something to be wary of. You notice how we get these peaks near the beginning of each year, and that's because of snow cover on the ground. Light pollution always goes up. The scattered light in the sky goes up a lot when there's snow cover on the ground. Okay, that's all. Lighttrends.lightpollutionmap.info for that. And now I'm going to go back one more time to this. Share slideshow from current slide. Okay. good. Okay, so there's an example. Here's an example from a little town, population 4,300, called Millinocket, Maine. Why this is important is that Millinocket is right on the edge of the newest night sky sanctuary in northern Maine, and this is a place where it used to be where there used to be giant paper mills operating day and night. The paper mills have shut down. They've left town, and so this town has an opportunity to really correct decades of light pollution growth. You can see that the trend has been slightly increasing, but it's not bad, and they're working to do better. Okay, I'm going to take another break and see if anybody has questions. Let's see. All I'm seeing here, I can't. How do I get?
Doesn't look like we have any fresh questions.
Okay, good. Well, let's move on then. I'm going to go back to this. The promise of LEDs. So on the left, I'm showing a bunch of different classic kinds of lighting sources. Many of them will look familiar to you. We have incandescents, which are not very inefficient. 90% of the light of the energy used in an incandescent bulb escapes as heat. Much better are fluorescent, mercury halide, fluorescent bulbs. They're all that over the time we've gotten better at generating light from electricity, but none of them can touch the energy efficiency of light emitting diodes, which are shown there on the right. And I just checked today. There are LEDs now that create 250 lumens, which is a measure, a quantum of light output per watt of electricity. The theoretical limit is around 300 lumens per watt, but it just blows away all these other traditional sources. So LEDs have been a fantastic development from the standpoint of lighting technology. It is going to revolutionize the way we light the night and maybe our indoor spaces as well. But there is a problem that we need to all be aware of when it comes to LEDs, and that is something called color temperature. So color temperature is a way of describing the spectrum of a light source based on its temperature if it were a black body radiator. And I don't want to get into that, but let me just give you a common everyday example. Imagine a candle's flame and the flame out of a gas grill or your stove. The blue light that comes off of gas flame is telling your brain this is a much hotter flame than the yellow color of a candle flame. And so the higher the Kelvin, the higher the color, the higher the temperature, the bluer the light source. And here, I'll give you a good example. Let's see if this will show. Yes. All right. So this is a sort of stepwise representation of color temperature. And you can see that the lower the number, the lower the temperature, the yellower, the warmer the light. And so as you get up to 5,000, that's the temperature of the sun. The surface temperature of the sun is about 6,000 Kelvin, and so that's daylight, and it can get even bluer than that. The problem is that a lot of early LEDs and the cheap ones that you can buy at the hardware store and a flashlight are very high temperature. They have a lot of blue in them. And blue at night is very bad. So now when you go down to buy lighting at your store, you can see on the label, in addition to telling you how many watts it uses and how many lumens it puts out and how many lumens per watt it puts out, it also gives you the color temperature. That's this number here, 3,000. And if you're really lucky, it will give you a little color bar like this. So this is what we might call warm white. And when it comes to lighting at night, we want the color temperature to be as warm as possible. That is, to contain as little blue light as possible, because it's that blue light, which has higher energy per photon, that is most disruptive to our nighttime environment. And I want to take you back. I showed you this before, but I'm going to show you it again in the context of now LEDs. At night, we rely on the rods for our night vision. And our rods are very sensitive in the blue part of the spectrum. That's why using a red flashlight at night when you're trying to read a star chart or whatever it might be is a good thing, because your rods are very insensitive to that red light. And you probably know that over time, when you're exposed to darkness at night, your eyesight improves, both because your pupil enlarges and also because your rods secrete, your retina secretes a compound called rhodopsin, sometimes known as visual purple, which essentially puts your rods on steroids and causes them to be super sensitive. And as soon as you expose those rods to a blast of white light or blue rich light, the rhodopsin gets bleached out and you have to start all over. Any of you that spent any time out with a telescope know exactly what I'm talking about. All right, so here's the deal. LEDs, by and large, are replacing throughout the world, throughout the United States, probably in your towns and cities, street lights that used high pressure sodium bulbs. They have that sort of characteristic peachy color that is pleasantly warm. And high pressure sodium is that color because it has virtually no blue light in it, as you can see from the spectrum. It's got a series of very sharp line emissions that combine to create that peachy color. Very little blue light. The effective color temperature is about 2200 Kelvin. Remember that number. By contrast, LEDs have blue light in them, and even when they're sort of cranked down to be at a lower color temperature, that's happening because the LED bulb has a phosphor that coats the inside of it. It absorbs this intensely blue and ultraviolet light that the native or new naked LED puts out, and then re-radiates it at a warmer spectrum, as you can see between these two comparisons. So 3000 Kelvin has a fairly small spike of blue. Most of the blue has been absorbed and re-radiated at other longer wavelengths, whereas a 5000 Kelvin has this very distinct, strong peak. If you were to see a 5000 Kelvin light at night, it would seem very harsh to you because your rods just, they overload on this. And this kind of shows that story. This heavy black line is the emission of a 5000 Kelvin LED. And for comparison, I have two other curves. The solid curve here, this is your daytime vision, your what's called photopic sensitivity. This is your eyes, the cones in your eyes, this is their response curve. And then at night, the dashed line is your circadian sensitivity. This is the light at night that would disrupt your sleep, that would keep you awake. It doesn't correspond exactly to the response of the rods, but it's close. And you can see that the strong peak of an LED is right in the wheelhouse of your circadian sensitivity. This is really bad. And it's not just human, all animals as well are completely disrupted by these strongly blue LEDs. So what's the solution? Well, not to have blue LEDs. And you might hear, as you go and talk to people about LEDs, especially if they're city officials or something, or lighting people that really don't know what they're doing. I have heard it said many times that 4000 Kelvin LEDs are just like moonlight. And if it's good enough for the moon, it's good enough for us. And that's just not true. This is the real comparison. 4000 Kelvin do match moonlight in the sort of red part of the spectrum, but in the blue part, it's completely skewed. In fact, blue light is closer to a 2200 Kelvin spectrum than it is to 4000. So blue light, moonlight itself is actually quite warm. Now, lots and lots of cities and towns are converting to LEDs, and why wouldn't they? Because they're highly efficient. They can be controlled in amazing ways. But in Cambridge, Mass, not far from me, this is a very densely packed place. They put in 4000 Kelvin lights. And I, for one, would not be the owner of this house and have this street light shining into these windows. Now, I will say in partial defense of the Cambridge system, every street light in Cambridge has an IP address. It is wired through Wi-Fi to a computer system. And so if the owner of this house says, wow, this light's way too bright, can you turn it down? A few clicks on a keyboard can turn this down to 50%, 30%, whatever. And in fact, in Cambridge, all of the streetlights power down to 50% of their normal output after 10 p.m. by computer control. This is something you can do with LEDs that you just cannot do with any other kind of light source. So it is really a good thing. Even so, the blue light that's in LEDs is a problem. It's a problem both for humans and, you know, all those lighting maps that I was showing you taken from space. The new generation of satellites are relatively blind to blue light. They're picking up mostly the rest of the visible spectrum, but not the blue light. So they're underrepresenting how much blue light is actually showing on the ground. And the American Medical Association several years ago came out quite strongly against LEDs as a above 3,000 Kelvin as a possible health hazard. Now we're getting near the end of this talk, and I'm going to leave a lot of time for feedback and questions. You know, when I got started in this game, banging the drum for better lighting at night, and LEDs didn't exist yet, really. I was kind of an odd tree hugger, environmentalist, whack job, but now I'm still all those things. But now, you know, a lot of people know about light pollution. There's a growing awareness of it, especially in mainstream media. There's a National Geographic cover from several years ago now, a decade ago, and that is downtown Chicago. And so a lot of places are now paying close attention. And in fact, just within the last year, the International Dark Sky Association and the Illuminating Engineering Society, this is the national organization that sets the lighting standards for the United States, partnered together after years of kind of dancing around to create what are called the 5 principles of outdoor lighting. That lighting should be useful. You can see them there. They should be useful, should be targeted, should be no brighter than needed, should be used only when you need it, and should be the warmest possible color that you can get away with. And it's really great to have the people who are listened to for lighting advice and lighting levels finally coming around to partnering with the IDA to control light pollution. And we're very hopeful that in the years going forward, that together this partnership will create new pathways for reducing lighting and having that lighting be smartly applied. But really, the bottom line is, no matter what the light source, whether it's the color temperature, the bottom line is to light only when you need it, only where you need it, and just the amount necessary. And as Tim Hunter, as one of the founders of IDA, and Dave Crawford, the other founder, would say, no more. Everything else is waste. I want to call your attention before we close. First of all, the IDA's website is darksky.org, and there's a lot of information there if you've not checked it out. We have a celebration coming up in April called International Dark Sky Week that I hope you and your clubs will participate in some way. It's a little challenging during the pandemic, of course, but one of the resources on the website is a little public service video called Losing the Dark, and you can see the URL for it down there at the bottom. Losing the Dark was professionally produced. It's about 7 minutes long, and it essentially touches on all the themes that I've been talking about here for the last hour or so, and condenses them in a way that is very approachable. Now, the video is a little dated now. It doesn't really go into LEDs at all, but it is definitely worth a watch. And so in closing, I just want to show you that these are your go-to places. I list the Massachusetts chapter there because, hey, I'm in Massachusetts, why not? And there's my contact information on the bottom. I welcome any of you who have questions about lighting, your clubs want to get involved. I think honestly, I'm going to tell you an anecdote. I give a lot of talks. I used to give a lot of talks in person to astronomy clubs. And I would ask at the beginning, no matter what the topic I'm talking about, black holes or whatever it might be, at the beginning, I asked for a show of hands of how many members in that club, this is an astronomy club, are members of the IDA. And I would get a handful. I certainly wouldn't get an audience full. And the sad reality is that if you take the number of members of IDA and take the estimate of the number of amateur astronomers in the United States, there's probably only 3 out of every 100 amateur astronomers that's a member of the IDA. And that's really pretty pathetic, because we as a group, as a group of hobbyists, we have as much to lose as anyone if we can't control the lighting. And so I encourage all of you to, when this is done, to please go to the IDA website, sign up, become a member. It's $35 a year. It's comparable to your club dues, and you will help us. You know, we have a IDA. I'm not on the staff, obviously, but IDA has a staff of maybe 8 people, and we're trying to change the world. And there are so many projects that we want to get onto. Here in Massachusetts, we're trying to pass state legislation that would control lighting for state and municipally funded projects. We're trying to change energy codes around the country. We're trying to intervene in cities like Chicago and Tucson, where they're about to install LED lighting. The IDA volunteers in the Phoenix area. Phoenix has roughly 100,000 streetlights. A couple of years ago, they were about to install 4,000 Kelvin streetlights throughout the city. IDA staff and volunteers interceded, spoke to the city council, convinced them of the wisdom of using 3,000 Kelvin, and in a 9-0 unanimous vote, the city council of Phoenix not only adopted 3,000 Kelvin as its standard for streetlights, but agreed to remove and substitute 3,000 K for the streetlights that they had already installed. One person can make a difference. The IDA can make a difference, and we can't do it without your help. We can't do it without your support out in the trenches. We can't do it without your dollars helping through your dues to allow us to undertake the programs that we would like to. And I think I'll stop my petition with that. Stop sharing, and maybe let's have a bunch of questions here.
Yeah, it looks like we've got quite a few questions there. So
all right, I can see them now.
Good.
Where can I find, Danny asks, where can I find out what kind of lighting my city has? Well, Danny, I'm going to assume that, well, first of all, let's find out if they've converted to LEDs yet or not. For those of you who have not yet had your town or city convert to LEDs, it is coming. There hardly will be a place in the country, in the US, in 5 years that doesn't have LED streetlights. It's the economics are just so compelling. So Danny, let's assume that if you haven't converted to LEDs yet, you'll know because the lighting probably has that peachy color that I was talking about. Those are high pressure sodium, and that's good because that means that they haven't made the conversion yet, and you can find out, you know, what is planned and ask hard questions and maybe make a difference in the lighting in your city. If you've already had an LED replacement, then you can probably go to either your planning department or your Department of Public Works. That's usually the people who are responsible for the conversion, and find out what the specifications were of that light. The 2 things that you want to know most importantly are, what's the color temperature of the lighting that got installed or will be installed, and how bright are the new lights going to be, or are they? A lot of times, towns and cities that don't really know any better will take a light that puts out a certain amount of light, 3,000 lumens, which would be typical for a 50-watt high-pressure sodium streetlight, and they'll replace it with an LED that also puts out 3,000 lumens. We call that lumen for lumen replacement, and that's BAD, bad. Because of the blue light that the LEDs have, your eyes will see that even though the amount of light is equivalent, your eyes will see that light as being considerably brighter. So you want to find out what the color temperature is. You want to find out what the lumen output is compared to what was there before. And if you're bothered by a street light, it's very possible that light can either be controlled or maybe they can install a shield so it's not shining in your face. Darian says that having checked, I guess you checked the light pollution info, that Chicago is trending down for light pollution. Very interesting. That's probably true. Remember though, Darian, that those new satellites are relatively insensitive to blue light. So you might not be getting the whole picture. And he continues to ask, oh yes, is there a light advisable to have on at night while he's sleeping, or should all lights on his bedroom be turned off? Oh, a great question. So Darian, I'm going to assume that you're an amateur astronomer and you probably use a red light out by your telescope. Well, you should use a red light in your grandson's bedroom. Take a standard little, night light and buy one of those teardrop shaped, maybe a red LED or a red bulb from a after Christmas sale or something. That's what we use in the Beatty household. We have red lights all over the place at night, and that way, when you get up at night, you can see, but your melatonin production won't be disrupted by that. Let's see. Deborah wants to know if IDA can feature more good quality warm LEDs in action on its website. Okay, that's a good point. One of the issues is that photos don't really show well the difference in color temperature. It's something that your eye sees in a way that the camera does not. It's one of those cases where the eye is actually better than the camera. So yes, it's certainly possible. And in fact, the IDA every year has prizes that are awarded for parks and whatever that have installed good lighting. Gary asks, we live in Sedona. Many of the homes are non-compliant. It's jumping around here. The city just enabled blue light LED for business lighting. What should we do? Well, Gary, first question is, do you have a lighting ordinance in Sedona? I don't know the answer to that question, but that would be the first thing to check. And the second thing is to talk to it's not so much the homes that are probably going to be the problem, but the businesses. And so you should, I don't know how you would approach the businesses. In some sense, you need to be brave and just go out there and talk to them. Do they leave the parking lights on all night? Does the city in Sedona itself, parking lots don't need to be lit at night when there's nobody there. So that's one great way to reduce lighting. If you want, Gary, I would like to continue this offline, but in Sedona in particular, there are huge groups of IDA supporters both on either side of you in Phoenix and also in Tucson. I would go there first, but I would be happy to help if needed. Bernard wants to know if the presentation and slides will be available with our communities. Yeah, Bernard, I guess the answer is yes. If you go to the Massachusetts, well, yeah, I need to update it, but on the Massachusetts chapter of the IDA website, I have posted this talk, and I'll work with Brian and Dave to see if we can get it, and Vivian to see if we can get it on the Night Sky Network somewhere. And then let's see. Brian wants to know.
Wait, just 1 second. I just want to say that I know that it's after the top of the hour and we never go long on our talks, but this is so important and we're having such a good time. We just understand if people have to leave because it's late some places, but I'd like to just keep talking if you don't mind.
Yeah, I don't. We'll go for another 5 minutes or so. Brian wants to know about Starling Satellites, which is it's a very specific kind of light pollution. There is some hope. The American Astronomical Society just had its biannual meeting, and Starlink and other companies were represented there. Brian, I encourage you to go read about this on the Sky and Telescope website. We have 2 articles about this that were just posted. All right, so David in LA says there's a new housing development near Fraser Park, a sacred space to be sure. How can we get them to put amber and down lighting in this new large community? What can we do to get developers to install correct lighting? Would IDA be able to help? Yes, for starters. There is a chapter in California, but I think it's up in the Sacramento area. So I would contact Tucson specifically. I'm a little bit far away from you. I certainly know where Fraser Park is. If the plan is not too far along, try to find out, David, who the municipal authority is that's approving that development, and work with them as well. One of the strongest, just generally for all of you, it's very difficult to get a light changed once it's installed. It's relatively easy to get the specifications for lighting changed before something is built. And so the time to be proactive is to keep an eye on, as you have, developments that are just being proposed or just being discussed. Watch those cable access planning board meetings and see what's coming down. So I think the answer is, if they're not too far along, there certainly is hope. You need to get the conversation going. Lots and lots of times, people install bad lighting not because they do so intentionally, but they just don't know any better. And it only takes one person like you or me or an IDA rep to educate and to illuminate and inform them, and the outcomes are awfully good. Okay, I'm going to try to get a couple of people who haven't asked yet. Andrea wants to know, what about equipping streetlights with integral motion sensors? Wouldn't be all the time saying energy. You're absolutely right, Andrea. And in fact, this has been tried in Europe. The thing about streetlights is, what are they there for? I mean, why are there streetlights in your towns at all? Often they're installed at intersections, which are conflict zones, or there are places where pedestrians and cars tend to congregate. There might be a crosswalk or something like that. And so that is a sort of place where a sensor could be used. And until LEDs, it was not possible to have such sensors. LEDs don't mind being turned on and off or dimmed up, down, sideways multiple times per second. You can do anything you want to them. And so consequently, having a motion sensor on some of those streetlights would be a good thing. It's a little impractical. The electronics would be really expensive to do that for every streetlight, but it is possible. One of the things to look for all of you, as you go out and try to find out what streetlights are being installed, find out if they have something. You remember this thing here, this little doohickey. The new ones have 7 pins. They're 7-pin connectors, and they might not be equipped with it at the outset, but those connectors allow you to install electronics that can dim the street lights later on at night or have them be computer controlled. That's something to watch out for. Produced by Particular Hanklet. She asks, what about headlights, for example? Yes, headlights do affect the night sky, and especially the new ones that are super bright and blue, but they are really not the main culprit here. It's the street lights and area lights and parking lot lights that we need to really attack. Okay, the last question, and I think we'll make this the last one for the night. Are lighting manufacturers helpful in recommending the purchase of warm LEDs in lieu of high temperature LEDs? Well, that's a really good question, Greg. And in years gone past, the IDA has been at odds, in conflict with, in battle with the Illuminating Engineering Society and other lighting organizations. And I think the realization has come that, guess what? Citizens prefer warm color temperature lighting at night. They prefer 3,000 over 4,000. They prefer 2,700 over 3,000. And the new wave coming up, which it's not coming soon enough to suit me. There's a new generation of LEDs that are called PC Amber. PC stands for phosphor coated. So it's not an innate emission at warm lights, but it's a very warm color temperature, 2,400, 2,200, very much like the high pressure sodium that they're replacing. And so I think that in the next 3 or 4 years or so, you will see, because the public is demanding these lower color temperature lights. There is no place hardly, at least in terms of a municipal street lighting program, that no place is doing 5,000 Kelvin anymore, though they were 10 years ago. Very few places are doing 4,000 anymore. That American Medical Association pronouncement had a chilling effect around the country. And so lots of places that were already planning 4,000 K switched abruptly to 3,000 K because the AMA told them to. And that's a really good thing. And you have for that, you have Mario Mata to thank. Some of you know Mario's name. He was former president of the Massachusetts Medical Association. He's a cardiologist by training. He is a key figure. He's on the council of the American Medical Association, and he's an amateur astronomer with a 32-inch telescope on top of his house. Go figure. So I think Vivian and Brian and Dave will perhaps call it a night. And again, my email is really easy in terms of dark sky stuff. It's kbeatty, that's KBEATTY @darksky.org. I would love to engage any or all of you, either generally or specifically about your situation and how you can help. I'll tell you this. Those of you who are here have invested an hour to learn about light pollution, and I really thank you for that. But one person can make a difference. One person with a well-timed presentation to your planning committee or your board of your select board or whatever your authority is, whoever will get to listen, can change the outcome of the lighting in your city for decades to come. It only takes one person saying, hey, I have an issue here that I'd like to bring to your attention. You can do it. And I and others on the IDA are here to help you do it. So Dave and Brian and Vivian, back to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kelly, for joining us this evening. And thank you everyone for tuning in. So everyone will be able to find this webinar. If you want to use this webinar to help advocate with some of your local groups who didn't have a chance to join us this evening, you'll be able to see this on the Night Sky Network website in the Outreach Resources section. And it will also be on our YouTube channel. We should, actually that should be up there now, but we will update the website tomorrow, but it's up there on YouTube pretty much right away because we've been live streaming it. You can also join us for our next webinar on Tuesday, March 23rd, when Dr. Kelly Lepo, I'm not sure how to pronounce the name, of the Space Telescope Science Institute will bring us up to date on the James Webb Space Telescope. Next month, we have a special event, as Dave mentioned at the top of the program. Night Sky Network members can join us for a Perseverance landing watch party on Thursday, February 18th. And so stay tuned for information on that. So keep looking up and we will see you next month. So good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Kelly. That was fabulous.
Yeah.
That was.
Join the IDA.